Welcome to ICE Webinars. ICE Magazine is proud to bring our new monthly webinar series to the imaging industry. ICE is the community that directly links nearly 7,000 imaging professionals with a monthly magazine, online community, annual conference, and now a monthly webinar series. Each magazine issue contains insightful and relevant content ranging from technological advances to new tools to professional development. You can obtain a free subscription to ICE by visiting theicecommunity.com/subscribe. We are excited about today's presentation featuring Jef Williams of Paragon Consulting Partners, LLC, and his team, Eric Rice, Val Capitula, and Lori LaFleur, also of Paragon Consulting Partners, LLC. The team will provide imaging leaders with an overview of value-based analytics and market trends, an understanding of various data engagement models, and information to help measure outcomes of your data management. We do want to thank our sponsor, Paragon Consulting Partners, LLC. Paragon Consulting Partners brings decades of healthcare leadership and results. Having served leading healthcare organizations and luminary vendors, Paragon Consulting Partners are proven clinical, technical, and operational leaders. Their time as consultants has shaped their approach to strategy development and project delivery, blending expertise, quality, and even some fun in collaborating with our clients. Visit pcpimaging.com to learn more. Okay, today's webinar is eligible and approved for one ARRT Category A continuing education credit by AHRA and is approved for one CRA credit. You can obtain your continuing education certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of the webinar. As I mentioned earlier, our presenter today is Jef Williams, an intuitive leader who strives to inspire teams and people. Jef and his team are committed to successful healthcare initiatives, including governance policy, administration, workflow, technology, and infrastructure. They have led efforts at many leading hospitals and systems across the U.S., including Sutter Health, Sentara Healthcare, and the UC Health System in California. Jef, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm excited to have my team on this webinar today. We wanted to bring an interactive approach to discussing engaging data. Data is not always an exciting topic, but it's certainly something that is top of mind for most of us who are working in the healthcare arena. And so I have asked some of my colleagues at Paragon to join me. What I'm looking forward to presenting here today is some of the lessons that we have been learning over the last several years of working with clients of different shapes and sizes. Our clients range from academic medical centers to IDNs to multi-physician specialty groups to radiology groups. So we've really got the opportunity to be exposed to a lot of different ideas and participate in a lot of development of analytics beyond the tools. We don't want to focus on tools today. We want to focus on the program of analytics and how it can value an organization, and really where we're seeing some great success. You introduced me, Jennifer. I've been in the industry for about 2 decades. I started in cutting my teeth in implementing PACS version 1. Over the years, I spent some time at GE, went into consulting in 2009. I've been consulting in different types of engagements since then. I started Paragon with my partners in 2016, and again, we continue to find some really exciting opportunities to participate. I'm going to ask my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves. Lori LaFleur is on the phone with us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Laurie Lafleur, hailing from Ontario, Canada. I bring about 20 years of experience in the healthcare IT and specifically the diagnostic imaging industry. I've worked in a very wide variety of roles as a software engineer, product manager, and marketer for vendor organizations, academically as a professor of health information science, and on the healthcare provider side, I'll do a lot of work in IT and workflow analysis, procurement strategies, and digital transformation strategies. So through that, I'm bringing sort of a wide array of experience to bear on the topic of data analytics today.
Thank you, Laurie. Val Capitula.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Very excited to be on this panel. Started close to 20 years plus of consulting under my belt. Started as a technologist in diagnostic imaging with diagnostic X-ray CTMR, and went into cardiology as a technologist and done some again administrative work. But mainly, I would say, while doing a lot of enterprise imaging, diagnostic imaging consulting, I've spent a lot of last part of my decade being in the cardiovascular space, so kind of bring a different flavor to this group, being again kind of in the implementation trenches and assessments of various systems and procurements of cardiovascular information systems. So excited to be on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. And Eric Rice.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for all listening. Eric Rice, by training, by education, I'm from computer science, started in consulting, and then spent the next 18 or so years on the vendor side in medical imaging, enterprise imaging, before moving back into the consulting side with Paragon here today. And I think of recent, spending a lot of time with our clients, trying to understand how to build insights out of their data, whether it be optimizing workflows, optimizing the operations of different specialty departments. We spend a lot of time working with our clients to build strategies around how they're going to continue continuous improvement really of their different organizations and the delivery of clinical services.
Great, thank you, Eric. And that's a great segue. Kind of jumping into the topic, we have again worked with clients of all shapes and sizes around their analytics, and data is not anything new. Certainly, it has exploded with the EHR, with the enterprise deployment of solutions like imaging. But we've always had data, and data has been captured in a lot of different ways, in warehouses and lakes and all kinds of different pools, and it's only been over the last several years where there's really been a concerted effort from a lot of stakeholders to start to drive meaning out of that data. And there are a lot of different data platforms out there to choose from, whether they are healthcare specific or they're generalized business intelligence tools, but there's a lot of different platforms. A lot of vendors provide some embedded tools in their own analytics solutions, and so we've gone from just capturing data to trying to drive meaning from the data. The next step, and this is where we get the engaging your data idea from, is healthcare organizations are historically, as one person once explained to me about their organization, they move at a glacial pace, and so historically, there has not been a lot of agility in the way that healthcare organizations exercise decisions and then execute to them. Over the last year, though, there have been a number of circumstances, including COVID-19, that have required healthcare organizations to become agile and to respond rapidly and efficiently to brand new needs and requirements. I think that organizations are learning from this, that there are ways to structure and to develop programs around things like data and analytics. What we talk about with our clients when we talk about engaging data is that the dashboards are great, the information is great, but it really becomes really an effort in building a program around what you're going to do with that data. Just knowing where your deficiencies are, knowing where the weaknesses are organizationally, or there's gaps is only the first step. It's then having the organizational structure in place and having the governance in place to be able to analyze that data, make decisions about that data, and then act on that data. And so it's beyond just having the data scientists who are doing the queries and building the reports or the dashboards. It's developing the organization capabilities to act on data, and that's really probably one of the biggest challenges, because organizations have to develop a strong governance around what we're going to do with that. One particular example that I want to use is a client that we have worked with, and there's a kind of a cycle, that observe, orient, decide, and act, or an OODA loop. And on this slide here, this is an example where we worked with the client around their volumes and their resource utilization and asset utilization. So it captured the data, and then we spent some time in the orient phase, which is really driving the meaning. In other words, we know what we know now, but what does it mean, and what can we do about it? And that's this kind of this 5-step process that we went through with them in developing, the KPIs associated with the information that we were analyzing, and determining what those KPIs would be, and then defining some of the market requirements associated with that. And then ultimately the fiscal outcomes. But again, this was only the second part. This is just driving the meaning out of the data. Then it had to move into how are we going to act on this? And this is where you develop a plan. And this cycle of engaging your data can be as small as a daily analysis of your system performance, or it can be something as big as we organizationally want to take a look at our volumes and see where we can expand or increase market presence or revenue. So this is really the key is developing a program that enables people to act on decisions that are made, and then that cycle starts over again. As you act, then you begin to observe again. Are we hitting our KPIs? Are we? If not, why not? And then that's the orient part, and it's a continuous cycle. Eric, you have done a lot of work with clients over the last couple of years, really diving into their data and helping them drive some meaning. Want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. I think if we look back, maybe one more slide too, Jeff.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I think if we look back, many healthcare providers began their digital move in the early 90s, and it was very much departmentally focused. Radiology was going live in the early 90s, going digital, I should say, in the early 90s, and others as well. But from there, I think healthcare providers through that decade found themselves with a number of silos of data. And come early 2000s, we started to see the concepts of bringing your data together with VNAs, and EMRs and EHRs started to play a larger role in consolidating all that data. And really for the last 2 decades, we've seen a lot of consumption of data, especially in healthcare providers. The amount of data being consumed into EHRs and VNAs is quite tremendous. And I think this trajectory, this theme is not unique just to healthcare. Actually, if we look, and next slide if we could, it's been estimated that 90% of all data globally has been captured in the last 2 years, which is a huge amount of data. They estimate about 2.5 quintillion bytes are created each day and are being maintained on servers, and the data is being captured. So this is broader than just healthcare. It's, you know, across industries and markets. And with that data, or of that data, and if I could again, Jeff, the next slide, here we go. Healthcare organizations on average now, with the consumption of all this data, are managing about 8.4 petabytes of data, which is up almost 900% since 2016. So the amount of data being consumed, again, the theme here around a lot of data consumption in the last 2 decades. You know, there's a lot of data that is needing to be managed, you know, by providers, but we're not yet seeing the value out of it. If we look at that too, of that data, about 80% of it is unstructured. So this is the data in the notes, the clinical notes, or in the images, or in the reports. It's data that's not found in those structured data fields that can be more easily mined. And of all the data, not just that 80%, but of all the data that's out there, only 0.5% of it has been analyzed in healthcare, estimated. So again, we've gone through, you know, since the early 90s, starting to go digital and bring data into different applications and systems. For the last 2 decades, consolidating a lot of that data into VNAs and EHRs, and trying to get the data silos broken down into common repositories. And we've consumed a lot of data, but only 0.5% of that has been analyzed. So really, when we talk about that 0.5% and how do we move that bar up, how do we start to get value out of that data? And there is a process to it. One, and looking at this slide here, one is about the access. You know, a lot of times the first question we ask a client is, all right, where are sources of data we can pull it from? Is it in the EHR? Is it in the VNA? Is it in the RIS or the CBIS or the lists? And how do we go about getting it? And I think some vendors are getting better and better about their access points, whether it be APIs, proprietary, or more and more support for FHIR. You know, but there are certainly cases where you need support from your vendors to gain access to, maybe they're direct into their database. So having those relationships, those kind of relationships with your vendor to be able to gain access through an API or direct data access or file system access can be important. Once you get access, it's going to be what it's going to be in some ways. You know, the structure we pull out from different applications at our client sites, you know, it may be a flat structure, or it may have a lot of referential relationships between the data, and it's probably going to take some investment in time to understand, you know, the structure of that data and the meaning behind it. You know, are you seeing, you know, a single patient per a bunch of transactions, or are patients being repeated? And what about the transactional data, and how is it structured, different transactional events that are happening on the data? You know, those kind of things. It's going to take some investment to really understand that data and how you can start to mine it. From that, you may have to do some prep on the data. Actually, when we talk to our clients, we talk about enriching their data. How are we going to take the data that we've gotten access to, and we now understand, but we're going to now enrich it? Maybe it is a transactional file or a transactional export of data, and it shows when a study is received, and when the technologist QC'd it, and when a doctor opened it, and when the finalized report came in. Well, you know, maybe we can enrich it by actually doing simple math between those transactional events to see the turnaround times of those various steps in the workflow. Maybe there's normalization of procedure codes. One site calls it CT head, another one calls it CT brain. Maybe we can enrich it and normalize that data into a more common lexicon, so that we can maybe have clearer analytics that we run around it. Also, too, when we talk to our clients, moving on around modeling. So there are a lot of structured definitions, and I purposely here just kind of generically say modeling. You know, there are many structured definitions of modeling around decision trees and linear regression models and neural networks and everything else. But I think the key here is, what question do we want an answer for with our clients, and we're looking at their data? What is it that we're trying to solve? And it may be the model that needs to be taken may be something really simple. It may be, I need to know how many procedures I did yesterday, you know, or how many procedures my CT modality did yesterday. You know, that's going to be a very simple kind of mathematical algorithm and equation to figure that out, likely. But it may be more complex, and the model may take a series of formulas and algorithms that feed into one another to finally answer your question. You know, you may have a question like, you know, based on my staffing and the assignments that my radiologists have and the seats they're going to sit in over the next week, you know, what's the expected backlog of procedures that need to be read over the weekend? You know, solving a question like that and trying to understand what your staffing needs to be over the weekend to get caught up in your backlog is different than calculating the number of CTs I scanned yesterday. So you know, I think at this point, you know, and it's been interesting working with clients. You know, I think a lot of people traditionally talk about, oh, I need to watch this for this KPI or that KPI. And I think when you start digging into it and we start really understanding what's driving the business or driving the efficiencies around the business or their clinical workflows for patient care or whatever it may be, we find that, you know, it's not just a simple KPI. Actually, there's a lot of thought around that, and that drives into the model of what kind of analytics need to be executed on. And from the model, we need to evaluate it. You know, we need to test it. We need to make sure that you know, from the model we've set up, that is actually delivering on something that is accurate. And there's probably ways that we can tweak it and make it more accurate. So part of that too is how you're going to tweak that. And really the last part that we talk our clients through from a data to value kind of perspective is really, and this is easier said than done as well, but how we're going to deploy it and automate it. And Jeff was talking about this quite a bit. But it's one thing to present a dashboard or a report, but to actually drive change into an organization, to actually drive change into providing better care or optimizing how we're staffing specialists for different types of procedures or whatever it may be, how we deliver the outputs of the analytics of the model to actually drive that change it can take some more work. So, and in some cases, a dashboard and a report may be sufficient, but in other cases, it may influence some application you have in your system, or it may actually require the analytics tool or solution to send off text messages or emails or restart a service or whatever it may be. So I think that part of it too, and we're talking about with our clients around working through the process of analytics with their data and understanding it all, you know, really how it gets delivered can drive a lot of value.
Great, thanks, Eric. That great insight there, and certainly, you know, as we take this from theoretical to practical, Val, I know that you have spent a lot of time recently with one of our clients, you know, really having to develop, you know, an analytics programmatic approach within the cardiovascular space. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's, you know, to Eric's point, we have this phased approach with a kind of a long goal line in mind, but, you know, more often than not, some of the customers, and again, these are relatively large delivery networks that we have an opportunity to assess and provide recommendations. We find more often than not, organizations really stuck on just the first steps, really just having access to data. one of the more common problem statements that I hear from cardiovascular administrators or physicians to a certain degree is that they can't generate a simple KPI like cost per case. That includes just let's say technical expenses and also professional fees included. It's just really disheartening when you have a large health delivery network that can't generate a technical and professional total cost per case. One of the, as you start diving in a little more, practically looking at this, you're seeing several kind of additional gaps in that whole process. And it's, again, this disparity in the systems. Cardiovascular service lines, maybe contrary to some other service lines in the organization, they're very data centric, very data heavy. And you may have sources of data in, EHR, whether it's billing module or ADT kind of module, patient level module, but then you can also have a CVIS that contains a lot of data. You can have a registry platform that's sitting kind of on its own island. And then on top of all that, you can have an inventory management system. So you could be looking potentially at 5+ systems that are pulling source data. And it's absolutely just overwhelming for an administrator that is having FTEs pull each data and then try to make sense out of it. So it's a big problem statement. Now, some organizations that we worked with are further along with a comprehensive, maybe well integrated CVIS that works well with a registry and EHR, so maybe not as difficult, but again, more often than not, we find organizations in that state. Some of the other challenges is kind of problem statements is just really access to real-time data that is needed within 1 to 2 day tops turnaround. Administrators are waiting times for 5 days for data to come across because various resources have to be involved and pull data from various sources. So these are some of the common kind of problem statements that we hear. As we look at like the root causes of this, as already mentioned, most of these systems are segregated. They're just not connected, bottom line. But also we find that the team behind these efforts are, again, not data scientists. They may be pulling data that may not be completely clean, right? There may be some lack of QA involved in the metadata. So once this data is presented, 5-7 days later, administrators are looking at it and they're doing a quick cross check against some other reports and they find gaps and they lose trust at the end of the day. And I don't blame them. And so that's another piece, is that the folks involved at times on these efforts, like a better term, not say sophisticated, but it's just the team that you have to work with, right? Without going out there and hiring specific data scientists to manage this. And then to close out on the kind of a root cause, some of the main root causes is really the way the governance. We talked about technical aspect of this, but Eric and Jef alluded to the operational governance aspect of this. Many times when the organizations that we assess, when they go to analytics initiatives or quality initiatives, they really don't assess the department level needs at times, specifically CVIS or cardiovascular services. And what I mean by that is they may implement a platform that covers some of billing, some BI aspects, some maybe diagnostic imaging, but cardiovascular at times is left on the sidelines, at least with the customers we worked, and it ends up being a kind of a disjointed governance, and that is probably one of the other main root causes that we find. So some of the things, as we look at these root causes, some of the recommendations for this team that's participating that we've seen that seems to be working, at least for now, in an interim before we reach that predictive, phase that Eric was alluding to, is really just looking at how do we get this data to be clean, right? How do we trust this data for administrators? Number one, is it really bringing in more expertise, or is it actually just doing some basic cleanup on your source data and building that trust? Also, there are some third-party data aggregator solutions available that can pull this data in the market and get you to a point where you can actually have comprehensive reports right away without going through a massive 2-year initiative. Those are some of the quick wins that we see. And again, getting governance to look beyond 2-3 years. There's mobile health right now is a massive influence in the data aggregation for cardiovascular services, the physicians are looking to work with these mobile devices, wearable devices that generate so much data that the administration and governance team need to look into the strategy. How do we collect this data and just be ahead of it? So that's kind of the general recommendations that we would like to leave you guys.
I think those are good points, Val, and I think too it brings up a point. I think for all of us working with our vendors, if you're on the provider side and you're partnering with a vendor, the new consumer of a lot of this data is not necessarily going to be people. It's going to be computers and systems trying to help make more and more sense of this. Because Val, as you pointed out, having people having to manually review reports and dashboards and things like that, I think as we get more and more inputs of data from wearables and things like that, more and more the vendor solutions, I hope, come up to speed on needing to kind of service the new user, which is computers, and consuming that data and trying to help make some sense out of it. Just a comment from
Yeah, Eric, good point. Yeah, great point. And one of the things that we also see with the governance, this is the operational aspect of this is, we find physicians that when they find a product in the market, cloud-based solution that generates a lot of data, they may at times go out there and just purchase that system, procure it and implement it, and then after math, they're asking for data out of it, right? So having that complete collaboration with your administrators, your IT teams, and physicians is critical to make sure that data is assessed early, the procurement's assessed early as well. And yeah, to your point, the data will exponentially increase, specifically in cardiovascular, and it's critical that teams work together, especially administration, leadership.
Yeah.
Good point.
Great. So Lori, let's bring you into the conversation here. I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, and you have done a lot of work. You've worked with some vendors, you've worked with some providers. We talk about all of this data, and Eric kind of expressed and demonstrated how much data is out there now. So, what are some of the things that you're doing to overcome, the information overload that's inherent with these types of programs?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And that's absolutely true. And this is where a lot of folks really get stuck, right? Because analytics, the tools have come a long way. The platforms and the other information systems that we have, to Eric's point, the EHRs and all the data that came with that, the digitization of imaging has really introduced a plethora of information that we can use to make all kinds of improvements in the healthcare system. But the side effect of that is absolutely what we call information overload. There's just so much information that's coming from these types of programs. How do we actually derive tangible value through analytics from those things? I just did a quick Google here, and even just Googling, what is analytics yields in about, a fraction of a second, about 1.7 billion results. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about information overload, all the information's out there. So my first piece of advice to every organization is the first step is to really just focus on your organization's priorities. Collecting a ton of data points is great, and it's certainly going to be useful in the future, and it's going to give you a foundation that you can build out and to build a continuous improvement program, narrowing it on the data points that you're going to need. But by focusing on your immediate priorities, you're going to be able to filter through that noise and identify the measures that are going to be able to make the most impactful differences within your organization. And the side effect of that, sort of Val's point as well about making sure that we keep the stakeholders involved, is that by creating these sort of priorities, we're also going to create a sense of shared focus between the technical and operational teams. So by agreeing to those burning priorities, setting those measurement criteria, and then focusing on those first, we can do that. As we progress, that's when we begin to introduce more data measurements and data points. So all the while we're collecting all of this great data. but what we're actually leveraging and what we're actually measuring, we're taking a very thoughtful approach to it. So by adding more data points into this, we're going to make further inroads towards our goals or address new ones, right? So as new objectives sort of appear, or our existing priorities sort of lower in priority because we've achieved a certain level of efficiency, then maybe we want to move on to the next one, and that's a great time to start introducing new sorts of metrics. Really, it's no different than learning anything else. So by starting out on something that's encapsulated and focused, we can build the organizational skills and experience around what's needed to undertake broader and more complex scope. So a great side effect of this approach is that we can build a repository of wins as we go. So that's a big thing for change management, right? Because that helps us to demonstrate progress and success to the organization that will in turn foster that buy-in and adoption and ultimately the engagement that we need to drive these analytics programs forward.
So with that in mind, Lori, most organizations outside of academia and some other larger scale IDNs aren't typically sitting on an office full of data scientists. So what can organizations do that that don't have the types of resources that can really do the hard queries and reporting?
Yep, absolutely. And I would say that those organizations are really in the majority, right? So those organizations that don't have dedicated data scientists or even informaticists, definitely, there's an argument that there isn't even sufficient IT resources to put the infrastructure in place. Data is a beast when it comes to processing, needing processing power and all of that to be able to mine through a lot of these tools. So that is a question that I get a lot. How do I actually overcome that to be able to leverage my data and get the insights that I need from my data in that situation? So no two healthcare organizations are the same, right? And the field of data analytics is not even. So we're not all on the same even playing field. But it's important to understand that analytics doesn't have to be perceived as a big and intimidating undertaking, right? So it's like people say, how do you eat an elephant? The answer is one bite at a time. Like I said just before, analytics is no different. So to those organizations who are feeling that they're lacking the necessary technical expertise to design and run an analytics program, my first recommendation is always to forget about the technology and focus on your workflow. What aspects of your organization would you most like to grow or improve? How could you measure those aspects of your organization? Just thinking in a greenfield perspective. Then we take a look at what information do you have today or wish that you had that would help you to measure those things. By answering these questions, we can often uncover the underlying data needs that are going to be needed to build those necessary analytics programs. So it's really, really simplifying it. On top of that, there are tons of analytics tools out there that can provide things like self-service tools for configuring dashboards and reports. So once we've answered those questions, we can dig in and start to familiarize ourselves with some of those basic tools. And those are really designed to be used by non-technical people as long as you understand what it is you want to measure, right? And so these work well for very focused initiatives like I mentioned earlier. So as you mature and as you get better and want to incorporate more and more analytics into your day-to-day operations, that's when I say don't be afraid to ask for help. All right, there's a lot of data experts out there working for industry vendors. So your PACS vendor might have a resource, or maybe the vendor that you're getting your analytics software from might have a resource. And there's also independent resources out there that can come in and consult with you to help design these programs. And build an analytics program that is tailored to your specific organizational situation and needs. So, starting from, very basic, how do I get started, to how do I operationalize something myself, all the way to becoming, very complex. It doesn't necessarily require that depth of in-house resources.
Yeah, I think, as I say, Lori, I think you raised a great point. I think there's a lot of places, a lot of people can start without need a data scientist, and we don't need a neural network to figure out what our patient wait times are in the waiting room, which is with COVID and everything right now, it's even more and more important. So I think that's a great comment. One thing I was going to I was going to highlight too, Jeff, is, you know, like a lot of our clients, when we started raising these topics around, you know, analytics and how we can help, you know, a lot of them immediately came back and said, oh, we have a BI team, we have an analytics team. And, you know, I think it's become apparent a lot of those teams have been focused on, you know, PQRI reporting and a lot of the reporting needed to get to, you know, around the finances of the provider and reimbursements and those kind of things. But that may be a good natural spot to kind of expand. And as everyone's being asked to do more with less, at least most providers that we see nowadays are being asked to do more with less. You know, I think learning how you can be more efficient and better use the resources you have to accomplish greater clinical care, you know, the better. And there is so much opportunity out there. I know one particular client we worked with, you know, they were having some issues with some of their backlogs of particular kind of imaging cases. And you know, after work and trying to understand what we were really trying to accomplish, and after obtaining the data and input, you know, we were actually able to organizationally change around some workflows that actually improve their throughputs of those imaging cases by almost 100%. So, you know, as we're all getting pressured to deliver more and do more with less, you know, I think there's a great opportunity to take the data we've all captured over the last 2 decades and really learn from it. And again, to Lori's point, you probably don't need a neural network to figure out a lot of value you can get out of your data. You know, there's a lot that can be accomplished, likely with, you know, with teams that you have or with some minor services coming in.
Yeah, that's a great point, Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eric, I wanted to add. Oh, yeah, Jeff. I had just a recent, similar to what Eric was saying, and Lori, you know, data science need. You know, I just had a recent experience with a customer where they had a kind of a comprehensive cardiovascular information system. For those that are familiar with that platform, it really contains a lot of data if it's well implemented. You know, you can have source EHR data, you can have billing, you can be supply management in there involved. You know, some registry data. So, long story short, you know, when the system was put in, there was some initial training that was done with the administrator, but it was left as is. After our kind of a short analysis there, we found out that the system contained a lot of data, and it really just needed some formal training from the vendor. And when we implemented some training afterwards, it was incredible how much the administrator and then additional teams that were involved, simple administrators, CPACS administrators, CVS administrators, they were so confident in the platform, they were generating reports almost within the next 5 business days that would drastically improve the administrative, you know, functions, if you will, and metrics. And that was a simple fix of just getting more training from the vendor, using that platform, using that data that you have, and just make your team more confident in the tools that they have. So I just want to share that. That was a recent discovery.
That's great. I think, yeah, great insight, Val. You know, one of the things when you talk about a data program, you know, as we've talked about, you know, delivering value from the data. Obviously, you know, this is a marathon. You know, it's not a 5K. We've got to, you know, implementing this there's got to be stability. There's got to be, you know, commitment organizationally. You know, there's obviously a fiscal component to it. Lori, you know, you've done this a lot. What do you see as kind of the bigger barriers to success for a successful long-term, you know, building a stable long-term program?
Yeah, Jeff, that's an excellent point. You know, because you can, you know, I talk about short-term wins earlier, but you know, those are only really to build momentum and add value. But we need to make sure that this program is built in a sustainable way that's going to be able to continue to deliver value in the long term. And one of the biggest things that I see are organizations, building up that analytics platform. Maybe they get some dashboards and reports that are really helping them to move towards their goals. And then they sort of rest on the laurels of those achievements and expect that the analytics program is going to continue on reasonably hands-free. And that would be a big mistake. One of the big reasons for that is that data is always changing. It's always, always changing. We are getting more of it. We are getting it from new places, to oversimplify. And we're often getting it in different ways, in different formats. And those formats can actually change even in existing systems as different updates and things come in. So data is an ever-changing thing. And so what we need to do is make sure that we're maintaining a clear and accurate picture of our organization's performance. And that only happens when we build quality control checks and balances into our analytics programs, right? So along with defining those metrics and KPIs, we need to be able to go back and take a look and make sure that we're monitoring the accuracy and quality of those data points. If we keep on top of that, right, and we keep up to date with the changes that are going on inside our organization, whether we're adding new modalities or taking on an entirely new service line, or we've acquired an outside practice, even considering the organic growth of your patient population, because shifts in those characteristics of those patients can actually affect your analytics data. By including analytics in the planning processes for all of those activities, you're going to find it much, much easier to ensure that the insights that we're getting out of the analytics programs that we build continue to be accurate and reflective of the evolving situation, because it will allow us to identify and accommodate those changes in data. If this is not done, then that's when we really risk our analytics becoming stale. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is not only inaccurate data, but the fact that our organizational stakeholders will now perceive the analytics as inaccurate or useless. And it's like we tell our teenagers. I've had a couple of them. I'm sure more than a few people on this webinar have dealt with this. Trust is easy to lose, but much, much harder to win back, right? So this is very true in the world of analytics. Evidence-driven decision-making requires timely and accurate information, which in turn requires oversight over our analytics programs to make sure that they're current and adaptive. So the biggest barrier to success and the biggest key to making sure that we achieve long-term success in my mind is building quality control and continuous evaluation of our analytics program into the planning process for everything we're doing in our organization.
That's a great point, Laura. We've touched on this a little bit. Maybe close out with this, because I know we wanted to leave some time for some questions. But when we talk about data integrity, one of the areas that obviously has been a very, very hot topic is AI, and AI obviously is very, very data dependent. Where do you, to any of you on the panel, where do you see are there any glaring gaps currently, or concerns that you have about the AI platforms that are out there, and the accuracy as it relates to the data that they are consuming? Anything that we need to be aware of or be careful for?
Yeah, I mean, so AI is basically like an analytics platform on steroids, right? And again, this is something I tell my students all the time, and everybody has heard this in technical realms: garbage in, garbage out. Your analytics platform is only as good as the information that you feed it. And the challenge that comes with AI platforms specifically is that they are all designed to deliver very specific insights. Right? So each AI algorithm is servicing a very unique use case compared to other AI algorithms in the ecosystem. And that does actually differ a lot from analytics, right? Because analytics, you can get an analytics platform that will give you operational insights, what's my throughput, what are my patient wait times, my resource utilization. It can also deliver insights clinically on, quality of care or research initiatives, and the list goes on. But you won't find that in AI. Individual AI algorithms are much more specific. And therefore, they require much more specific data sets. And each data set for each AI algorithm has its own formatting requirements, its own data requirements, its own processing requirements, and on and on and on. And so, you know, bringing AI into an organization really does require that maturity in data management and data quality control, especially, to make sure that the information we're feeding those algorithms is going to be prepared in a way and served up in a way that we are going to be able to analyze that information to derive accurate insights in a timely manner. And that second half is a key quality attribute for information. If it's not timely, it's not useful, right? So we need to make sure that we have the systems in place and the data in place so that there's not a lot of manual rework of the information that needs to go in to feed these algorithms, because then you risk inaccuracy, error, and of course, as I just mentioned, delay. So, you know, these are things that we need to be very careful of. And the other thing that I'll sort of highlight there as well is sort of the misnomer of machine learning. You know, certainly there are algorithms out there that can adapt and learn to data as it shifts and evolves. And this is great, right? This is going to be a huge boon in the analytics and AI technologies when it's finally mature. But one thing people really need to keep in mind from a healthcare perspective is that machine learning algorithms, at least as it pertains to medical device software, so where it's actually deriving clinically pertinent information into the diagnosis or treatment, right? So those types of systems, the machines are not learning in real time. So we need to provide feedback loops to the AI algorithms in order to ensure that they do continue to learn and evolve. And that can sometimes be a bit of a manual activity. And again, there's a quality control element to that as well, is making sure what information makes it back into the feedback loop for that training is relevant and accurate and going to serve to improve the algorithm over time. So, you know, the field of AI, highly relevant in this discussion, but, you know, I'll sort of take a pause here because, you know, we could almost have an entirely separate webinar entirely on this topic.
Certainly. Absolutely. I think in the interest of time, we should probably open up, Jennifer, for any questions that may have come up.
Hi there. Thank you all so much. We would like to now open it up for questions. And just to remind our audience that in order to ask any questions, please use the question feature on your dashboard. Our first question is, do people use their own analytics solutions or by third party?
Who wants to take that? I mean, there's kind of a it's a both and in most cases. Eric, you want to talk a little bit about, you know, I mean, we have clients who are using multiple platforms, and in sometimes that's the constraint that they have, right?
Yeah, you know, I think as kind of mentioned before, you know, depending on the solution you have, you know, your EHR, your PACS, or whatever, some of them have some analytic capabilities built in, and so those are being used. There are also off-the-shelf generic solutions that are widely adopted, you know, across industries. So not necessarily industry specific, but will provide a technical type user, and not necessarily a data scientist. You don't have to be a data scientist to use these tools, but, you know, a technical user to be able to create their own dashboards and charts and things like that. And then there are some, you know, depending on the provider space that you're in, there are some solutions on the market that you know, will be more built for that particular area of specialty that are marketed. So you can look into those. And then maybe lastly, and there's probably other options too. Certainly people will build their own. You know, some of the bigger networks may have staff that are building their own solutions, but too, there are services out in the industry where you know, a services organization can come in and kind of build that strategy and solution for you to deliver what may be needed.
Thank you. Our next question is, how do we get our teams to buy in to using analytics tools, considering it might change the way they do their job?
So that's part of that organizational change. You know, analytics is the technical and the data part. The executing and acting and change is the other part. We work with a client that you know has been a very successful organization for a very long time, and I think back to when we first started implementing an analytics program. You know, most of the decisions that were made from the leadership perspective, from just this is how we've always done it and this has always worked. They made a concerted effort and essentially drafted an organizational change model that included communication, included stakeholder buy-in, as a way to, you know, as Lori was talking about, you know, we need to trust the data, but we also need to trust our organizations. And so they made a concerted effort to build a you know, essentially trust from leadership all the way down to the organization, so that as people saw that there were going to be changes, you know, that were going to improve the environment and improve the delivery of care. So, you know, that's certainly a key part of this, is making sure that you have good organizational buy-in.
Yeah, you know, I think to add to that too, I think analytics can be a great tool for you to justify, you know, not only the investment you want to make tomorrow, but then to justify its continued value back into the organization, and therefore maybe help you to make the next, you know, investment or improvement that you're trying to make, you know, in the services, clinical services you're providing. So, you know, actually, I had one particular client who said, you know, 80% of what they do is keep the lights on. Well, you know what? If we can free up, let's say we can drop that down to 60% because we make you more efficient, you know, you can start working on you know, really innovating and improving patient care, and that continuous improvement that really we should, you know, all be working towards. So.
Yeah, and let's not wait till we're in the red line, right? Let's be proactive. That's I don't know how many times I've seen that.
Thank you so much for those questions, and please note in the audience that if you have any questions that we didn't have time for, those will be passed on to the panelists. Thank you, Jef, Eric, Val, and Lori, for a great presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the products they provide to our industry. Visit pcpimaging.com. A quick reminder that you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you will be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. ICE Magazine is proud to bring our new monthly webinar series to the imaging industry. We will present a free monthly webinar for the remainder of 2020. Our upcoming presentation features ICE columnist Kelly Cray, coding strategies, and Janelle Byrne. For information, visit theicecommunity.com/webinars. Thank you all and have a great day.